Those are bar chords. They're what I'm working on now, and I don't like them. I like books, though, and as the title suggests, there's a theme for the books for this, but first, before we get to that theme, another couple of things. Movies, also, um, because I recently watched for the first time all of the James Bond movies that I hadn't seen before, and some that I had, and then Skyfall and Spectre were not available to me. But those are pretty much those are the only James Bond movies that have come out that I have not watched in the past couple of weeks. I found them all on Hulu and said we had tried, my roommate and I, to watch the old classic Bonds before, and it just hadn't worked out. And I wasn't good at watching movies back then, so I couldn't pay attention because they moved differently than movies today that I'm used to. So there was all that. But we went through, start to finish, the canon ones, the Eon produced, or whatever they're, I guess Eon produced. Eon is the company. And so 1 through Casino Royale, the Daniel Craig Casino Royale, and then we watched the Sean Connery Bond movie, Never Say Never Again, that is not technically part of the series, and more recently, because it was the subject of a podcast that I was planning to listen to, we watched Quantum of Solace, which is the second Daniel Craig Bond. So, and I, separately, she didn't want to watch the older Casino Royale, the comedy, but I had watched that earlier this year, and then I kind of rewatched it in the context of having seen all the others. So, I watched a lot of James Bond, and then we watched some Indiana Jones, because so much Sean Connery made us want to watch the thing we first saw, or I first saw Sean Connery in, and then we watched A League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, for more Sean Connery. So, but it was interesting watching a continuous series in its way, from 1962 to 2006 or 2008 with Quantum of Solace, and seeing kind of the evolution of so many things, the evolution of special effects, the evolution of fight choreography. It looks pretty ridiculous for most of the Bond franchise. The evolution of filming technology, which I know less about, but I could kind of sense, yes, these are being filmed differently. The Pierce Brosnan movies from the 90s, huge shift in how they looked. And but Pierce Brosnan was default my favorite Bond all these years because of GoldenEye and others that I was aware that he'd been in that I had seen, but I couldn't name them, and I didn't really care. He was just all that Bond was. But now Bond is Sean Connery, George Lazenby, Roger Moore, Timothy Dalton, and Daniel Craig. I guess was also on my radar, but he wasn't the one from the Nintendo 64 video game that I loved playing. So Pierce Brosnan was by default my James Bond, and now I think he's probably still my favorite as the best blend of the kind of goofier more charming sides of Bond from the Connery and Roger Moore and George Lazenby, and also the darker Timothy Dalton, Daniel Craig, dangerous killing machine Bonds. He kind of blends them, and looking forward to reading the books to see. I mean, I've heard who Timothy Dalton and Daniel Craig are supposedly closer to the Bond from the books, but I have not read the books, so I cannot make that decision, that judgment for myself. But I believe my dad has the books, and that I will eventually be able to read them. And, but I wouldn't say that I have a favorite Bond anymore. Pierce Brosnan for nostalgic reasons, but they all really bring something, and it's different things. And I've pretty much, well, with the George Lazenby and Timothy Dalton have 3 movies between them. Didn't really get a chance to make their mark, but I was able to find a favorite Roger Moore, a favorite Sean Connery, a favorite Pierce Brosnan, and a favorite Daniel Craig. And well, it's the Gold trilogy plus Casino Royale. Goldfinger, Man with the Golden Gun, GoldenEye, and Casino Royale. Uh, and I, I've mentioned I think of movies in terms of groups of 3, like per franchise. So I was thinking, I have thought before, but I hadn't seen them, so I couldn't make any judgment. But if I ever wanted to own Bond movies, which 3 would I want? And those are the gold ones. Casino Royale I already have. It came out at a time when I was just getting DVDs as they came out if I wanted them, as opposed to now where I mostly find them old in library sales. And so the gold ones are the ones that if I find them old in a library sale after I have collected other DVDs that made the list first of DVDs that I actually want. So sometime in the future I might own that gold trilogy. But GoldenEye is pretty much I want it for nostalgic reasons. The video game, it's not my favorite plot, but the other 2, Goldfinger and The Man with the Golden Gun, they actually were my favorite plots in the Bond franchise because they differentiated themselves in noticeable, distinctive ways. Most of the Bond movies, from what I gathered, including GoldenEye, are pretty much about a human-controlled weapon up in orbit that shoots down at the Earth, and including Tomorrow Never Dies, because it's about a media company, and so that's TV satellites beaming messages that are nefarious down down to Earth. And I like that actually better than GoldenEye as far as Pierce Brosnan movies, but it's got to be GoldenEye, which has its great things. Also, Robbie Coltrane and Alan Cumming and Famke Janssen. It's like that's a cast that I can recognize and feel nostalgic about, but also they're just great, fun performances. The whole Sean Bean, the classic Sean Bean thing, I won't say because it might spoil the movie for anyone who hasn't seen it. But if you know what I mean by the classic Sean Bean thing, it works. And the Man with the Golden Gun, Christopher Lee, is the Man with the Golden Gun. And it's a great, interesting kind of puzzle performance. And there's what's her name? Not Christmas Jones, but something that silly. Miss Goodnight, something Goodnight. And she's really, I mean, it's not the most constructive female character ever in a movie, but she's hilarious. The actor is hilarious. And as far as disposable Bond girls go, she's probably the funniest that I've found, the most enjoyable. And as far as songs, the Paul McCartney "Live and Let Die," probably my favorite. I love the song from the Daniel Craig Casino Royale. So I finally have all this frame of knowledge of the Bond movies that I never had before. I will go back and watch some of them, maybe all of them at some point, not necessarily all in a row like I did this time. But it was fun, and it was a great exploration. And it led to some validation later on from the former Screen Junkies, former Screen Junkie Dan Murrell has launched his own YouTube channel, and he's started off things with kind of an introductory Ask Me Anything type of thing, which he called Ask Merle Anything. Someone asked him to rank the Bond movies, to say if he had favorites, and he named the 4 movies that I named as my favorites, and he did this after I had made these decisions. So that was very validating, as was another person. I forget actually what prompted this, but for some reason he held up his battered old copy of the Jurassic Park book and said it was one of his oldest possessions, and it looked a lot like mine. Uh, Almost exactly. His spine is a bit more worn, but he's probably read it more often than I have. Um, but I was left wondering, does he also have a 25-year-old leaf in his copy of Jurassic Park? Uh, so anyway, those were a couple of very validating things. Because he's a guy I admire. So to that was fun. Um, Indiana Jones movies, there aren't as many. Uh, Ultimately, I liked them. Well, it's easy. It was easier for me to like the collective more than the Bond because there's so much Bond. It's not that I didn't like it. It's just it's not my kind of thing. Um, the whole spy thriller thing, whereas Indiana Jones with the history and the mysticism and the magic element, and the mythology, it's more interesting to me. Uh, and because there are only 4, what I would look for as far as if I'm going to own any of them, I would just say if it's a single case with 2 DVDs with all 4 movies across them, then I'd get that. I don't know if I would get any of them individually. Temple of Doom, it's fun to look at for the most part, but I didn't like it that much. It's probably cliched to say Raiders of the Lost Ark my favorite. I liked Kingdom of the Crystal Skull more than I remember liking it, and more than Temple of Doom, which surprised me. So, not as much to say about that. But things to do. Big viewing projects to have for quarantine lockdown. So far, we had already started Avatar: The Last Airbender, but we finished that series. Now we are on to Downton Abbey, which we've been curious about for a long time, and happened to have found the DVDs at the Book Nook in East Rochester for seasons 1 through 5. And then season 6, we have access to a Amazon Prime account. We can watch that on there. And then the movie Downton Abbey will be on HBO, which we have access to one of those accounts as well. So in a couple of weeks, probably we can get through the series. It's not like Avatar. There were 20 episodes per series, and James Bond, there are 20 movies at 2 hours apiece. But Downton Abbey, 9 episodes, I think, per series, all in the neighborhood of an hour. So, or per season, all in the neighborhood of an hour. So, it seems like a breeze compared to other projects that we've had, that we've done. But also, of course, I've been doing a lot of reading, and I'll get to that in a second. Because I just remembered there are a couple other things that I wrote about on the blog, and I'll have links in the description to each of the blog posts. There was the one, just a somewhat hyperbolic respect the medical workers sort of thing. The protesting lockdown thing has been bothering me, and I just had to get it out, and that's how I get things out, is not in Facebook rants, but in blog rants that I then post on Facebook, and people can click on it and read the rant if they want to. They don't have to see it in their feed. And then today I wrote about my wild idea to get every American invested in the stock market while it is down, which I don't know if that's feasible. I don't know if it would be helpful, but it seems like it would be helpful. It would get people more engaged with the stock market, probably help a lot of people financially, and then the stock market doing well would actually represent the American economy and the American people doing well. Um, and I dedicate the first paragraph to I don't actually know what I'm talking about here, but I invite people to correct me if I'm wrong that this would be a good idea. So for more details on that, the link will be below. But for now, the subject of the the title of the video. Um, on April 1st, April Fool's Day, I opened this book and I placed it in front of the book that I was reading so that it looked like I was reading this book, which my roommate has wanted me to read for years. And then she came out and she saw that I seemed to be reading it, and she looked so happy. And then I let it fall and revealed that I was reading the Sound of Music book, and that she looked devastated. But given the subject of the book, the fact that Max Brooks has been on TV a lot and getting into my head, and well, it wouldn't normally be seasonally appropriate, but it's seasonally appropriate now. And so I actually did pick it up later in the month to read it, and I recently finished it. And it was quite good. I mean, it's not my thing for several reasons. Not a fan of zombies or zombie narratives. I'm not a fan of kind of disjointed story to story to story to story to story. So the interviewer character here is the character that we are with throughout the book, but it's not about him. It's about each individual people. It's a different story. So, and it's got the universal theme about zombies, but again, that's not really my thing. They're all connected, but it's not linear. I didn't, get to know any individual and stick with them throughout the story. So it had a lot going against it. I still enjoyed it. I think it's a very clever thing. I learned some things about history and about other cultures, the concept of survivors of the bomb in Japan, the people who survived the atomic bombs that the United States dropped at the end of World War II. I learned about, what else did I learn about? I finished it a couple days ago and have read other things since. More details are in the blog post. But it was kind of a criticism of the way certain cultures and certain countries do things and how that would go against, or it would be the opposite of helpful in the event of a zombie apocalypse or just a run-of-the-mill non-zombie pandemic, which is what we have, and some of the things came true. There was a couple weeks ago, someone somewhat tactlessly posted a picture of their yacht and said social distancing in the middle of the ocean or something like that. And then week or so later, there's a little thing, and I think it was the New York Times, that said isolating on their yachts seemed like a good idea until they ran out of food. And similar things happen in here. Nobody's named, no real life public figure is actually named, but I'm pretty sure Bernie Sanders became president in this book. I'm pretty sure that George W. Bush was made reference to, and I'm pretty sure that Kim Jong-il, not Kim Jong-un, but his father Kim Jong-il, mucked it up in this book, and North Korea does not fare well in the zombie apocalypse. So and it's justified. I mean, it's structural things that allow the zombies to overwhelm places, it also few things I rarely see: zombies in snow and zombies in water. I watch a lot of the zombie stuff for my her, and because she loves it. I watch them walking around the American South and The Walking Dead for seasons and seasons and seasons, and it seems to me that if they just went to Maine, they'd at least get a break, because the zombies would freeze, or zombies in water. There is a little bit of that. There's like a glimpse of that in The Walking Dead, but in here, they go into detail about how horrifying that would actually be and how it would. Let me just say, it's not as cool as the as the undead pirates in any of the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. So I would ultimately recommend this, especially for now. It's a very different thing than what we are going through, but it does have some parallels, and Max Brooks being on TV is perfectly justified from him having read this book. Um, yeah, we don't have zombies. I don't think we ever will have zombies, but the basic spreading of disease factor does apply, and so I'm glad I picked this up, and I am glad that I picked this up at the Brooklyn Book Festival, shortly after seeing Colson Whitehead at a Barnes & Noble event. Really interesting guy, said some interesting things, some surprising things, which I probably put a hint of on social media. It was so long ago I won't try to say now, but I was taken with things that he said, and I was excited to read my first Colson Whitehead book. I don't know where it falls. It's from 2011. I don't know where it falls in his own canon, and I just started it a couple days ago. I'm about there. I'm exactly there. That's why the bookmark is there. Unfortunately, it is also a zombie book. I deliberately did not look into it because I wanted to be surprised, and it is also a zombie book, and it is not World War Z. And I'm sure, again, I'm about a third of the way through. It's got a lot of time to pick up and distinguish itself, but for the most part, so far, it's pretty run-of-the-mill zombie book. It's about a cleanup crew and their backstories. But the zombies are run-of-the-mill zombies, and the feel of it, the post-apocalyptic wasteland, New York City. I've seen that. It's well done, certainly. The guy's a great writer, and I look forward to more of his books. But it's just unlucky that I happened to place this book after World War Z, thinking I would get something completely different than World War Z. But it's a flaw in my system of wanting to go into books and be surprised by how they unfold. But I very quickly thought, oh, this is another zombie book, and it might be a great one. I haven't gotten far enough, which is to say, to the end, to decide whether or not it's a great zombie book. I'm going to give it to her to read because she loves the zombie books, but it's just unlucky placement. But it's a good first impression as far as making me want to read more Colson Whitehead. Not that I didn't already want to read the famous books of his, The Underground Railroad and The Nickel Boys. So, and I will also read Sag Harbor and The Intuitionist. He's a big deal, and I want to. I don't want to just read the older books. I want to read the books that people are reading now, and talk about the authors that people are talking about now. So I'm glad I'm reading it. I'm glad. I just hope that the Joyce Carol Oates book that I bought at the same time as this one is not also a zombie book, because I don't actually want to read a lot about zombies, even though 'tis the season. But if you want to read about zombies and you've read those two, but not this one, and maybe you've read this one too, I think I've talked about this one before. I think it was part of my 10 years of reading best books of the decade, whatever I did video back in January. This I saw. I hadn't read it, but Joss Whedon said that it's heartfelt, painfully human. And let's see back here, anyone else? Joss Whedon says, as fresh as it is terrifying, it left me sighing with envious joy. I believe I was in the midst of, or had just finished watching all the Buffy seasons of Buffy for the first time, again, at her request or suggestion / she had them, and so we watched them. This was before we had much streaming. She had them on DVD. I got her season 7. But I bought this for her for her birthday, on which day she was the girl with all the gifts. Or maybe it was for Christmas. I don't remember exactly. But she read it, then I read it, and it's pretty great. It's my favorite zombie thing of all zombie things that I have experienced, movies, books, TV, etc. It is about a little girl zombie, and her teacher, and the scientists who are trying to solve the zombie problem, and uh, other child zombie type things. It's a very interesting take. I liked it because it does something, goes places where I hadn't seen in zombie books, zombie movies, zombie anything, and and I could appreciate that. It's a very interesting ending, not necessarily an ending that one would want, but an ending that one understands. And there's a movie. The movie is okay. Um, he was pretty close, I think. And but so if you're into zombie stuff or these books, zombie books, I guess there are Walking Dead books. There are graphic novels. I'm not an expert on zombie things, but right now I happen to be reading my second zombie book in so many weeks, and so I wanted to bring this one out too and just say uh, it's a way to cope with what we're going through by looking at something similar but worse. Uh, so yes, highlighting Zombooks on this episode, but also looking forward to reading something else. I think I'll leave it there. Stay safe, stay inside. Occasionally go out, get fresh air. I take walks not every couple of days, on Tuesdays and Fridays, um, while I make phone calls. And I typically don't go far. I don't stay out for very long, but um, I'm careful. I wear the mask. I've got a couple of options now. We did our big shopping trip a couple of Mondays ago, and so it's almost been 2 weeks. So I think I can safely say we did not get sick on that day, even though we went into a couple of shops. But be careful, and might be going stir crazy, but I don't think we want to be encouraging too many people to open up uh, their restaurants or movie theaters or anything just yet. It's hard to be patient. It's strange and scary, but uh, and this is kind of what the the blog post that I mentioned before is about. Uh, it's not just about you. It's about the people who might infect you, who you might infect, and then the people who might have to experience them in in very very bad shape, which is something that nobody wants to go through. And so it's about thinking about the chain and how the actions of one affect so many more people, especially when it's a literal physical um, connection. So that's my word on this. So stay in and read about zombies, or dinosaurs, or Alexander Hamilton. I'm not quite halfway through that one. Hoping to be done with it in another month or so. Yes, I will leave it there. Ram the blade ship, failure is impossible.